So we're just going to get started. Welcome to my talk. I'm Dr. Anya McDermott, and I teach on the security and forensics programs here at John Moores University. Typical. There we go. So what we'll be looking at today is the rise in sort of cybercrime, and I'll be getting some examples from the news of things that have occurred recently. One of the more popular ones recently was the Squid game online scam. And similarly to the title, do you want to take part in a Squid game? It seemed a bit too good to be true. We'll also going to look at the rapid rise in ransomware and how that's affecting society. And then I'll briefly, just at the end, talk about security here at John Moores University. If you have any questions throughout, feel free to put some in the chat box and I'll try to address them at the end. So yeah, do you want to take part in a Squid game? I remember when I saw something about this online and it sounded really interesting. So for those who haven't saw Squid Game, it's recently been on Netflix. And the premise of it is that people who had some financial difficulties were able to take part in this big game. So I think it starts off with about 100 participants or so. And basically you play some games, and a lot of them are like children's games and things. And basically every time somebody else gets knocked out, the pool or the amount of money that you could win increases. So scammers took advantage of this. And as you can see on the screen here, this was one of the ads that you could get. It says, let the game begin, participate with one, basically you needed one coin to enter, and you could win up to 100 BMP, which is a type of Bitcoin. The issue with this though, was that while initially the investment seemed really cheap, so you'd say, it costs like a penny or like $1 or something to, buy in. So many people bought into it. So then you might think, okay, well, if it's really, really cheap, I'll buy more of this cryptocurrency and, it therefore increased the chances of winning. But the problem was obviously it was a scam. So the game was supposed to go live this month. And one of the things with it as well was it linked to like an external platform. And this type of scam is called a rug pull, literally where they pull the rug, from beneath you. And basically everyone who invested their money, and some it was small amounts and other people it was, larger amounts. Basically, the scammers took all of the money and all of the cryptocurrency. Now, in theory, this isn't supposed to happen. Cryptocurrency is basically whenever you make a purchase, it goes into this public ledger. So it's actually, in theory, easy to trace a lot of the cryptocurrency money. But the play to earn cryptocurrency thing, basically, it uses a different platform. And well, as I said, it's a scam. Depending on how much you paid, your initial buy-in, as I said, it might be like a manageable loss. So you might say, for example, I'll spend the amount of money I'd spend on a night out in town. And then other people would spend larger amounts of money. So in my opinion, a lot of the Bitcoin sort of cryptocurrency thing, it's just like gambling or like stock market exchange, So in the case of this, the scammers were the ones who made off with all the money. It's also important to note as well that yes, there are some legitimate Bitcoin or sort of currencies, but cryptocurrency isn't regulated. So, be careful. I would suggest strongly to not just randomly buy cryptocurrency. And as I said, in this case, it was only the hackers that won. So a lot of people bought in. They thought, oh, I'll buy more. It was, you were encouraged to share more people to take part. So then you'd think the premise of the game was, you have one entry. But obviously, if you buy more of it, then you think, you'll increase the chances of winning. The more people involved, the more money that there was. But yeah, this is an article from Wired. And I'd suggest literally just looking up right now, a Squid Game crypto scam. And there was even people who legitimately do stock exchange and they buy and they invest in cryptocurrencies. They lost their money as well. Because it was around so quick and then it just locked people out of their accounts and they got all their money. Here's like a cool infographic of you can see basically how the value worked. So for the most part, it was down here. You'd think, oh, I bought some for a few pennies and, you've got, what do you call it? Basically, you can take part in the game. And as I said, then it peaked. It was worth over like $2,000 at one point. So more and more people were like, oh my God, I should buy more because the stock's going to keep increasing. And then it just dipped, it cut. And the people actually just like, they deleted any evidence of it. So people couldn't even take their money back. So yeah, it was an interesting scam. Other examples of sort of scams as well is not even just with games, it's sort of like pop culture. So like artists and films and different types of things. Basically, anytime something new is released, like for example, the Marvel's Black Widow film and like Kanye West's album, or his, which also was a really bad album, probably his worst one. But one of the things as well is on torrented and sort of peer-to-peer sites. A lot of the time people will put up malware and other types of viruses with the name of that new thing that people want to download. And basically then that sort of shows and sort of increases the rise in sort of ransomware, malware, different types of things. A lot of fake streaming websites as well. They harvest your data or they maybe redirect you to something else. So I'd say another example of torrented things or pop culture sort of scams would be, it's, in my opinion, it's really annoying that you can't watch the 3 o'clock match on a Saturday. So for anyone who's not into football, you can't actually watch the 3 p.m. match on the TV, but certain sites show it. So some people will go on, put their computers, health at risk just to be able to watch football or to, watch certain things. But sometimes these websites redirect you and also do like sort of downloads in the background with malware and other types of viruses. But yeah, so it's on the rise. I've put these 3 examples here, and I've been teaching for about 5 or 6 years. And often a lot of the students who'll come and study cybersecurity or forensics or other disciplines will say it was something that these 3 actors did that basically got them into cybersecurity. So the first group's anonymous, and a lot of their hacking attempts or a lot of things that they did, it was sort of like a moral thing. So sometimes they'd hack like the Westboro Baptist Church or like certain websites that maybe were infringing upon people's human rights. And in their opinion, they were saying these people were doing bad things, therefore they're going to mess with their website. It is a gray area because some people say like, oh, some of the things that they do or some of the websites they've taken down, they kind of did, they did like things that benefited people. But then you have the other hacking group, LulzSec, and I think it's some people maybe who had a lot of the ideologies of Anonymous, but literally they used to just like hack people for the crack. Just like they'd just steal people's data. They'd take down websites. One of the most famous one would be the CIA website. And yeah, I think as soon as they targeted the CIA, then they soon got discovered soon after. But like that, sometimes they'd do some stuff. They'd mess with like websites or companies that maybe they didn't agree with morally. But a lot of the time they'd just be stealing people's data and releasing it and harvesting their information as well. The last group though, I could actually say there's so many students who got into cybersecurity because of the last group. They're Lizard Squad, and they are the group that hacked the PlayStation Network. I think it was Christmas about 8 or 9 years ago. And I think a lot of people always say, you don't think about something until it affects you, directly. And for a lot of students, they didn't really think about like cybersecurity or, the hacktivism of certain groups. But Lizard Squad just liked trolling people, basically. Well, a lot of the groups did as well. One of the sort of famous hacks that Anonymous were accused of, but they didn't do, was the PlayStation Network data breach. And this was stealing, I think it was credit card information and also just like taking company data. Anonymous actually released a statement. That's the statement on the right-hand side there, where they basically said, yeah, we didn't do it. They were like, it wasn't us, but people were pretending that it was them. So some of the videos, you can see them online on YouTube of like data breaches and stuff. A lot of the groups will at some point on like a social media feed or some sort of other presence online, they'll say, yeah, we did it. But Anonymous were raging because people like thought that they did it. They basically said like, we don't harvest data. We don't steal people's stuff. We troll people basically. Well, for the most part. LulzSec, they used to have a Twitter account and they had like other social medias, and literally they tweeted when they hacked the CIA. And as I said, Lizard Squad with their weird logo. Sony's online CEO declared war on them. So a lot of the time it's script kiddies and just like people, a lot of these groups sort of say, if I wasn't able to do it, well then, it's like having the key to someone's front door and opening the door and saying, well, if I wasn't allowed to do it, how come I was able to get in? a lot of them do this. So people do hack groups. They do security audits. They do penetration testing and things I'll talk about later on in the lecture. But if you actually find like, what do you call it? If you find like a vulnerability or something, you can contact the company and tell them like, hey, I was scanning and doing things and I accidentally noticed that, your front door's open in your system, blah, 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 and you can tell them. But they found a lot of vulnerabilities and stuff and then just exploited it for their own, basically for their own entertainment. Anyway, yeah, I'd say this year from about 2020 onwards, one of the main things or one of the main issues is all to do with Bitcoin payments and like hacks and things to do with that. In July 2020, Twitter fell victim to a coordinated social engineering attack. Now, Twitter security, for the most part, is very good. And they've sort of prided themselves on like every time Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat or something goes down, Twitter's like, we're fine. They have a different setup. But in the last year or so, there's been a lot of Twitter hacks or Twitter vulnerabilities. And the main vulnerability in a lot of these things were the employees. And basically, the employees were targeted through social engineering attacks where, they were trying to find out more about a person, maybe trying to befriend them online. And basically, the humans were the weakness in this issue. Obviously, with this coordinated attack in 2020, they were saying the fact that everybody was working from home because of the global pandemic, had something to do with it. But at the end of the day, literally people targeted specific employees. So in this case, Twitter's highest profile accounts, so like Barack Obama, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, even Kanye West, they all started tweeting basically saying like, hey, do you want to make some money? Do you want to, invest and get some cryptocurrency? And a lot of people invested their money. Here's some of the examples here. So Barack Obama, saying, I'm giving back to the community due to COVID-19, basically send this amount of money and you'll make a good profit. Elon Musk did it, and also even Apple, and people were like, well, these are real people, these are in this case, these are verified Twitter accounts. So people thought like, oh, in this case, it did sound too good to be true, but people thought like, but social media wouldn't lie to us. The one person though, who wasn't in this list of sort of like hacked sort of accounts was Donald Trump. And the reason why he wasn't in that list was basically a Twitter employee, I think a few months before, had deleted his profile. So they actually had this additional layer of security, or basically had, his profile stored somewhere else. So he actually wasn't affected. So then people thought like, oh, it must be real because, everyone else is tweeting about it. And in the past as well, there's been a lot of reports of like Apple Cloud hacks. So there was one, I think it was like Jennifer Lawrence and some other celebrities, and they'd had basically personal photos and personal files taken from them. And everyone used to say like, oh my God, it was like a cloud hack. It wasn't a hack. It was social engineering, basically, in the case of Twitter and a lot of the other things as well. And one of the issues in this case was that the iCloud API had a vulnerability where you could basically just say like, oh, I forgot my password. And you could try and guess someone's password. And there was, I've got it on the next slide, but it looked really legitimate as well. And often as well, I think definitely in the case of Jennifer Lawrence, I just think she didn't really have a secure password. So people just guessed it, got in, locked her out of the account, and then like stole all their data. So the victims in this case, as I said, they could access their accounts, download their emails, and get all their iCloud backups. So this is just an example here of, it looks legit. Well, both of them are vulnerable emails. And on it, basically they're saying click here in order to fix your account or to do something. But usually when you click on any of these links, it redirects you and it seems very legitimate. So it's important to just be aware of these different types of emails. So I think the main point from this is that a lot of the time it seems like it's a really complicated thing, but it's not really. It's just someone's targeted you via social engineering, or they're trying to manipulate you into giving up some information, or clicking on a link, or basically doing something wrong. I personally just delete a lot of these emails. If it's important, they'll get in touch again. Yeah. And as I mentioned, with regards to Bitcoin, Bitcoin is a decentralized digital currency. I realized I hadn't mentioned that before. But a lot of people use cryptocurrency, but it's like the stock exchange. Literally, its value can fluctuate. But Bitcoin does fund a massive cybercrime. So basically, a lot of ransomware cases or a lot of hacks and sort of attacks and things, a lot of the time to get access to your data again, they say, oh, you need to pay a ransom, but you need to pay via Bitcoin. And then they'll specify because there's so many different types. And one of the other sort of questions or dilemmas for this as well is a lot of the time people who might pay somebody to launch a cyber attack on their behalf, or, might give someone Bitcoin for like doing some work for them. Technically, is that considered financial motivation? So if you're ever convicted of a crime, and sometimes you can prove that someone, financially benefited from doing something, or there's been an exchange, I think it's a bit of a gray area because Bitcoin technically isn't. It technically isn't money. It is a digital currency. It's not regulated as well as like actual currency. So, there's a bit of a question with regards to that. So I've just included as well some examples of the different types of breaches that have happened. I think the main thing to take from this talk is that every domain is being hacked and attacked quite regularly. For example, this one happened in September this year, and the UK's Ministry of Defence basically lost a lot of data. So they were hacked, and it was all to do with like Afghan interpreters, and it was their personally identifiable information, so PII. So sometimes you might say like, oh, what would people want with my information? But a lot of the time, like gender, date of birth, blood type, just really random things, healthcare data, people could misuse it. In this case as well, it was like, I think it was like their addresses, their email addresses, just a lot of information that you wouldn't want somebody to, have access to. Other examples, so in September 2021, people who visited Thailand, all of their information was stolen. So it was like international visa applications. So you'd get like full names, the dates that they're away, their passport numbers, visa information, and this information could be sold on to somebody else, or people could like harvest or basically try to steal somebody's identity. And again, this literally only happened like 2 months ago. And other examples as well. So in Scotland, I read this article recently where they basically said Scottish firms have a 1 in 2 chance of, falling victim to a cyber attack. Like that, the odds of that's not very good at all. You're either going to get hacked or you won't, like based on just everyone being targeted. The UK's National Cybersecurity Centre, every year they put like statistics out, and they put these reports and they put these recommendations. But a lot of the time it's about having the budget, it's about having the personnel and the information. So I think definitely small to medium businesses need to be helped more, because as well, if you're victim of a cyber attack, the financial fines that you'll get from like the Information Commissioner's Office in London, like a lot of the time people can't actually afford to, stay as a business. Important to note though as well is in 2021, and sort of basically since last year, COVID affected cybersecurity a lot. COVID affected cybersecurity, and it just made it worse because basically all of a sudden people are working from home and more devices were, not being secured. And a lot of the principles or sort of cybersecurity policies that people had in place didn't reflect or, take into consideration that someone might be doing their work, but then using the same device for like social media profiles and things as well. In 2019, this interesting report came out where it basically said like hacks were up, breaches were up by 52%. And a lot of the time it was customer data, financial information. 2019 was supposed to be the worst year for data breach activity. And then the global pandemic happened. And then 2020 and 2021 sort of were just as bad. Email addresses were 70% of the data compromised. So a lot of the records of, breaches. Passwords as well were 64%. And if anyone uses Google Chrome, for example, it's very useful now because Chrome, when it auto saves your passwords, it now tells you, sometimes it might say there's been a data breach. It's like one of the little setting notifications. And it says there's been a breach. Your passwords may have been compromised. Or it also says, you have the same password on 10 different sites. Maybe, have a more robust password policy. So it's things like that, because you think, oh, well, what would someone want with my email address and my password? Well, if you have the same email address and password on numerous sites, it could be like you don't care if someone's got access to your like Asda online shopping account, but you could use that same details for like other like information where people might be able to access like your credit card information and other things as well. So yeah, email addresses and passwords are like a high value target for hackers. Also in 2020 last year, I was going to say, well, we're all used to working online and remotely. Obviously this lecture is taking place remotely as well. But last year when everything got switched online, there was a rise in attacks targeting universities and schools. Newcastle University and Northumbria, they were targeted by cyber attacks. And I think they were targets of like denial of service attacks. So, network interruptions and, like people trying to log on and access their information. There was disruptions to that. There was also universities that were victim of ransomware as well. So they were, their data was encrypted and they were locked out of their systems. And Blackbaud hack was the name of one of the more popular ones, or sort of one of the more devastating ones. And it was 20 universities and charities in the UK, America, and Canada. And they all used the same sort of like provider for, some software in the background, basically. And they all had their data breached. And one of the annoying things as well is not just in this hack, a lot of the time, a lot of the people victim to a lot of the growing threats are actually charities. I'm like, who would hack a charity? This is another example as well. So it says ransomware attack leads to death. Basically in Germany, I think there was a ransomware attack launched against a university. Again, a worldwide kind of attack. But what the attackers didn't realize was that the university actually shared the same network as the university hospital. And basically they were locked out of their files and things. And a lot of people in ambulances and things had to be redirected to a different hospital, and someone died along the way. So I need to check if they actually find who launched this attack. But one of the things was that people were arguing was that actually that they were guilty of like manslaughter. So not like they didn't mean to affect somebody, but a lot of the time, a lot of these attacks are launched and they don't really think about the people that could be affected. A lot of them are just trying to make money or just trying to mess with people. Finland, this is another example. Finland, their security agencies are trying to collaborate. And I think a lot of the world are as well. They share threats, they share, information on like the different types of malware and other sort of viruses, targeting certain industries. But even like in this case in Finland, like they're trying to help and trying to collaborate with other people and sort of trying to defend like other infrastructures. But like people even attack like their public service websites. So like, if you want to go find out what days your bins are collected, like people hack those websites and knock them offline as well. There's not like one specific domain. It's, quite varied. Even border control, that was the other thing as well. Sorry, border control, population registration centers, online information portals, like, anything. And Norway, they had a lot of breaches as well. They had some targeted attacks. And I think it was linked with like TikTok as well. The hashtag for you sort of attack. And it was like basically TikTok had different types of practices. They don't have really strict legislation either. And people were using that and other types of social media with clickbait links and other sort of phishing things to sort of spread malware and other types of viruses. Again, the aim is to steal people's data. So passwords, documents, browser cookies and credentials and things was the target for them. Food supply chain. I've included this as a random one. Other than last year, you had the Suez, was it the canal? You know, the big, can't think of the name of it, the big boat that was stuck in the canal. That obviously affected people, supply chains and sort of management and things like that as well. Food industry is increasingly targeted as well. So literally how industrial control systems work and how sort of the systems that help build and cook and sort of run a lot of the backbone of, you know, these industries are also increasingly being targeted. And even those who try and help. So there are some cybersecurity vendors that are trying to help people, and people hack them as well. And I've included some examples here with New Zealand. I'd say the main thing to take from this is that anyone's a potential target. I'd say the scale of the thing is that it's a global issue. People need to help, they need to collaborate. Cybersecurity vendors predict that the global spending on cybersecurity products and services itself will basically exceed like 170 billion by 2022. There's constant like high sort of like published ones, and you see about it, as I said, in the media and in the news. But a lot of the time there's attacks and hacks happening that don't make the news. So I'd say one of the things that sort of, in my opinion, led to the rise in ransomware was the fact that they started paying the ransom. So people always say, like, don't pay them, don't pay the ransom. You know, it's like rewarding like a chat, you know, someone rewarding someone being rude and being bad, you know, rewarding someone, you know, who has like bad behavior. The case with ransomware, though, was that all of a sudden, 2 years ago, it just seemed to be like everyone seemed to be, you know, getting hacked and falling victim to ransomware. But then companies were coming out, and it was like, I think Uber had been hacked, and they basically paid the ransom. But then they told the hackers, like, don't tell people we paid you. And then they did, they told people. And there's other companies as well that have been paying the ransom quietly. And people realize that, like, it's actually really hard to track. And if you look up on a lot of it, a lot of the time, there's not many convictions as well. So this is a really interesting read. If anyone wants to read more about it, the Threat Horizon report, every year they release sort of the trends of the year, you know, in cybersecurity and stuff. 2021, as you can see on the key here, it says digital connectivity exposes hidden dangers, digital Cold War engulfs businesses, and digital competitors rip up the rulebook. Last year, it was saying, you know, technology outpaces control, conflicts loom, etc. Every year, they're basically saying, oh, it's getting worse. Like, oh, we're investing money, we're writing new policies, but everything's digital now. So a lot of the devices and things that people use, they're fit for purpose. They do what they need to do. And a lot of the time, unless something's actually broke, you know, you don't really fix it. And also things cost money to upgrade. But what this report looks at, and basically what a lot of the industries are realizing, is that there's just new vulnerabilities all the time, relentless attacks, disruptive cyber threats. Everything's digital. People want things quickly, efficiently, and also now with like GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulations, or something along those lines. Basically, they tried to add more documentation and compliance and sort of rules on. Basically, companies have to be able to say like what they do with your data, how they're using it, and if they don't need it, you know, they can only have it for a period of time. That's helped people maybe be more transparent about how they're using your data, but it just means then if there's an attack or a breach, they're just going to get fined a lot. I thought this was an interesting infographic. So I think going forward, more and more people have smart devices in their homes. This is called like the Internet of Ransomware Things. All of these devices technically could be in your household, could be smart, and an attacker could steal your data from them. It could be credit card information. It could just be even the profile about you. So your user characteristics is basically potentially useful to somebody else as well. And I think going forward, like if there's just going to be more and more like smart devices in homes. I personally have like smart bulbs and things. I have an Alexa. I like asking her like, what time is it? What's the weather like? You know, I could just look outside. They make you smarter or more efficient in your house. Like you can turn lights on, you can turn things off. Smart kettles, in my opinion, are stupid. I know someone who got one, but they still have to fill up the kettle. But they say, oh, I'm on the bus and I could, remotely, get it to stick the kettle on. And you're like, why not just do that yourself? Anyway, yeah, there's so many different things. But I think in the future, you could basically get locked out of your house because some hacker has decided that they've remotely accessed your files and locked you out. Okay, so I've given you many, many, many examples of, the growing trends and threats sort of in society. Here at John Moores University, the computer security program is very popular. It's led by academics who, do research in the industry. We get guest speakers coming in. We keep up to date on basically, the proper methodologies and tools that are used. So here we have this, and this is an example of the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And regardless of industry, a lot of companies use that. So if there's been an attack or a breach, you can go on and you can learn about, that family of malware, or, you find something in your system in one way, you can learn how to sort of protect or, fix it in another way. Some of the examples of modules we do, I've included on the screen. So things such as like network defense, penetration testing, secure software development, operating systems. The more you study, sort of when you go throughout the years, it gets more hands-on. But at the start, you obviously have to be aware of like the different types of operating systems, secure software development, basically how to best, secure a system, or, if something's happened, how to quickly and efficiently like log what's happened, basically make your networks more resilient. Just an example of, again, the NIST cybersecurity framework. This is something else that we use. And across a wide variety of modules, you'd be learning all about, protecting the network, detecting, anomalies and threats in the network, using some open source tools, industry tools, and basically like a wide range of different technologies. I'd say one of the other things was I was trying to get examples of games that actually use cybersecurity. I was playing, trying to think of the name of that game. It'll come back to me. But anyway, a lot of the games nowadays, you go in and it says like, oh, you look at a camera and it says like, oh, remotely hack this or do this. Or if anyone's ever watched the TV show, Mr. Robot, in that they do some of their, some of the events that they do, they use like Raspberry Pis and they use like Kali Linux and they use a lot of the sort of like industry approaches. But they are very accurate. So here you would be using Kali Linux. Here you would be setting up virtual machines, virtual environments, and trying to secure them and trying to maybe like hack into them ethically, as well. So yeah, it's all about getting hands-on experience and basically then going into industry and being able to keep things secure. One of the other things as well you'll learn about is risk level scoring. So it's all to do with like things that happen. It's about like looking at your assets. So, the devices that you have, the data that you're using, and things like that. And you basically give it a score, and you can sort of categorize them as well. And it gives, like the likelihood of like an attack happening. So for example, small to medium businesses or companies using certain Windows versions or like, software that's, a certain age. You'd think, okay, well, that's an old thing. You'd look at the threats to that. You'd look at potential vulnerabilities, and then you'd give that a score. And you might say, okay, at the moment we're fine, but actually the likelihood of us being hacked or the likelihood of someone targeting us through, these means, you give it a score, and then you either try to come up with a plan, or as a lot of people do, they just really hope that like no one attacks them. But I've got an example here. So the Fukushima nuclear disaster in 2011, this was caused by a low issue. So someone's job is to do like risk management, or, literally, I say, you think of a scenario and you think of like the worst thing that could happen for every possible thing. It's someone's job to literally be the buzzkill who goes, okay, everything's going great, but what if? And in this case, someone's job was to say, okay, well, the likelihood of an earthquake and a tsunami happening at the same time is really low. It's probably not going to happen. They noted it, but they didn't have a plan in place for like, oh God, what if it happens? And in this case, these were two things that happened at the same time. The probability was really low, the likelihood low, but it still happened, and they had to have a plan. So that's often what security is. It's about thinking about the worst thing that could happen to the system, or like if someone had your data, or if it was, shared by the wrong person. It's about thinking about like, what could happen. So another example of this would be sometimes people steal customer data, and right away they'll ask the cybersecurity person, like, was the data encrypted? If you say yes, brilliant, they'll still try and like breach the data. They'll try and, crack the passwords or the encryption. But if it's not encrypted, then right away they've just stolen your data. So it's about trying to add layers or sort of add sort of things and sort of approaches in place that will basically help minimize the chances of things happening. Yeah, one of the things you do as well is you rate threats with dread. So it's a methodology that you can use. There's many other ones as well, but this is just an example of a useful one. So you rate things and sort of plan for things, and you think about, D, so the damage potential. You then consider like the reproducibility of it. So, if it happens once, can it happen again? The exploitability, the affected users, and the discoverability as well. So you'd be rating these threats. So these cyber breaches, these potential vulnerabilities that could happen, either that you're aware of or that you maybe have planned and considered. And then you rate these as well. But yes, so they're just some examples. I've put a link here, which is very useful. I'd say if you go onto the web browser and look this up yourself, Great Statistics. It's one of my favorite websites. That sounds really sad, but it is. No, it's very good for getting statistics on sort of looking at like threat mapping and sort of the current trends for sort of cybersecurity and basically what's happening in the world. It's created by Kaspersky, and it's a really nice infographic, publishes up-to-date threat intelligence, and it also just shows what's happening. So an example here, this is just one I prepared earlier, but it looks at like the most infected sort of countries. You can look at like historical data. It breaks it into like different types of attack. It tells you what data sources they are. So, if you're using like a publicly available data set of vulnerabilities, and then it breaks it down. And also it's a live map as well. So you can see a lot of the time where the attacks are coming from or like places that are being targeted. And yeah, it's very useful. One other thing to note with regards to Kaspersky is, in my opinion, it's a very good software. It's got a good suite of facilities, but a lot of companies won't use it now because Donald Trump publicly said about Kaspersky being linked with like hacking. So a lot of companies won't actually use them now because they think they're introducing like another vulnerability. So you don't have to use their services, but you can go on and look at their interesting websites and things. So yeah, say I'm nearly at the end of this slide, or sort of at the end of the lectures. But basically, what can we do to help make things secure? I'd say at the bottom, the main point is users are the weakest link. So we need to educate the users. We need to utilize some of the examples I've got on the screen here. So we need, to use different types of authentication. Basically, we need to educate people about basically, how the systems work, what tools that they're using, understanding, what your assets are, and basically what data that you have. A lot of the time it's diagramming. It's about drawing like a network diagram or drawing, literally entity relationship diagrams where you look at all of the different things and how they interact. And sort of basically what's here on the slide, a lot of this you'll touch upon on various levels throughout the degree. And also you're kind of learning as you go. So it's a very interesting area. It's very exciting. But it's very rewarding, the job. Who is responsible for this? Security is a responsibility of everyone. Users are responsible for behaving properly. Sorry, behaviors are users are responsible to behave properly. And basically, like everyone has like a moral sort of thing. Morally, please don't like steal someone's data. Don't misuse data. If you notice a breach, you can disclose it to people. You can do that, without having to, post it on social media and tell everyone like, haha, we stole their data, or, we did many things. But yeah, we're at the end. So as I said, if you have any questions, let me know. security is about preventing bad things from happening, often without knowing that these bad things are happening or, who's making them happen. But yeah, it applies different technologies, processes, and controls. And basically the aim is to try and prevent sort of cyber attack or reduce the risk and sort of minimize the chances of exposure. It's about like having a layered approach and using different tools and techniques to basically minimize what happens. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed today's talk. Sorry, I was getting my words merged there at the end. Yeah, basically security is everywhere. It's everyone's responsibility. And I think we need to, we basically need to have a better role at trying to minimize, bad things from happening. But yes, so if you came to study cybersecurity here at John Muir's, or computer security as the degree program's called, you'd be doing a range of things, some theoretical based stuff, and also more like hands-on sort of practical stuff as well. So you'd be doing what you would be doing in industry. And obviously we've got a good academic team here as well. I'm just going to check if there's any questions in the chat box. Don't think so. No. If you have any questions though, in the meantime, feel free to send an email. I'll pass my details on to the organizer of the event as well. And feel free to check out our website where we've got some examples of the types of modules that you'd study, the tools and techniques that we use. And I think we've got some examples and quotes from like students and stuff as well. But yeah, well, thank you very much. I will let you go. I think the next talk starts in about 10 minutes or so.